Thanks everyone for joining us in our Toolbox Tuesday session on water resilience challenges and opportunities. I'm Kim Clark, Planning Supervisor of Resource Conservation and Resilient Communities here at SCAG. First, some housekeeping. The meeting will run an hour and a half and is being recorded. All participant lines will be muted, and there will be a Q&A session at the end. If you have a question during a presentation, please type it into the chat box. We will log all questions and then voice a selection at the end of the session. Closed captioning is also available by clicking the Show Captions button on the Zoom ribbon. A recording of the webinar and the associated PowerPoint slides will be available on the SCAG website. We will send out a link to everyone who has registered after the event. Please do fill out our survey at the end of the session to help us improve future Toolbox Tuesdays. To start things off, we at SCAG would like to offer a land acknowledgement that we are currently living and recreating on the unceded lands of Indigenous peoples who have been the traditional caretakers of the Southern California region. SCAG's main office is located on the historic lands of the Chumash, Kizh, and Tongva people. If you haven't already, I encourage you to visit the resource included in the chat to learn more about the Indigenous peoples in the community where you live. Now, an overview of our session. First, we'll hear from Charlotte Will of Estolano Advisors and Stephanie Zinn of Geocentric Consultants, who will provide an overview of SCAG's work on the Water Action Resolution White Paper. Next, Lee Anderson, Senior Civil Engineer, will present for Los Angeles County on their water plan. From the Metropolitan Water District, we have Liz Crossan, Chief Sustainability, Resilience, and Innovation Officer. And then after her, Ryan Shaw, Director of Water Resources at the Western Municipal Water District. Finally, after all of this, we'll hear a presentation, or we'll hear from our speakers again during this discussion panel, which will be led by Cecilia Estolano, founder at Estolano Advisors. With that, I'm happy to pass to Charlotte and Stephanie.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. My name is Charlotte Will. I'm with Estolano Advisors, and I'm joined by my colleague Stephanie Zinn from Geosyntech. As Kim mentioned, we'll be walking through some high-level findings from our work with SCAG over the last year or so, developing a white paper as part of SCAG's Water Action Resolution. A quick overview of what we're going to talk through today. We'll provide a little bit of background on the project, and then we'll talk through our findings related to water resilience challenges and opportunities. We'll then close out with our conclusions and a couple of next steps. So in terms of project context, we know that by 2050, there may be up to an additional 2 million people living in the SCAG region, and that the region is also anticipating major growth in water-intensive industries. Water agencies are working to ensure that there is enough water supply to meet this growing demand. But we also know that there's an opportunity for planners and water managers to collaborate to support sustainable water management during this period of growth. To understand this opportunity, we underwent the development of this white paper, which had 3 major project components. The first was conducting a series of stakeholder interviews where we spoke with water managers and flood control districts, as well as state agencies and community-based organizations. Geosyntech also analyzed the water data landscape to understand the availability, quality, and consistency of water management data in the region. And we researched key actors in the water management landscape in the region, including regulatory bodies, as well as key water purveyors. So I'll move us into our findings. Each of those components contributed to the development of our white paper, which we organized based on 5 indicators for water equity. We developed these indicators based on California Assembly Bill 685, which recognized the human right to water in the state, and we pulled from other water equity frameworks on the topic. So our 5 indicators, which we'll also use to organize our presentation today, are reliable, which describes the number of water sources and the reliability of each source. For example, one jurisdiction may rely on one water source, like imported water, while others might rely on a diversity of water sources, such as groundwater, storm water, recycled water, as well as imported water. And it's also important to understand the reliability of each of those sources. For example, we know that some imported water sources are becoming less reliable over time due to climate change. And so this is especially important for areas that rely specifically on just that source. Clean and safe refers to the quality of water for its intended purpose. Affordable refers to the portion of household median income that goes towards those water costs. For the planners on the call, you might think about this similar to housing burden, thinking about the amount of your income going towards housing costs. Accessible referred to the quality of water infrastructure responsible for getting water from its source to its destination. And then resilient refers to the ability for a water source to bounce back from climate change impacts, such as drought, but you might also think about it as wildfire, which we saw in recent months in LA County. So moving into our first theme, reliable, as I mentioned, we understand that there is likely to be increased demand from industrial and residential sources in the coming years, and that water managers, we understand through our interviews and research, water managers are looking for strategies to diversify their water supplies and are also identifying a need for more water storage in their groundwater basins and reservoirs. We learned about some promising strategies in the region to address these challenges. We'll hear about several of them today, including coordinated efforts between public agencies to promote integrated solutions, as well as local water supply diversification efforts, such as groundwater management and stormwater capture. We also looked at the data related to water reliability, and we identified that opportunity for more collaboration between planners and water managers. This can be seen in the fact that regional housing needs assessments take place every 8 years, while urban water management plans take place every 5. So there's an opportunity for more collaboration between those cycles. And we heard at the regional level that there isn't a consistent record of the number and type of water supplies that each water purveyor uses at the regional level. And so this creates a challenge for understanding water reliability regionally, or for understanding what parts of the region might need more support with diversifying their water supplies. We are seeing some data sets on these topics at the state level from the Department of Water Resources, as well as locally through each district's urban water management plans and groundwater sustainability plans. We know that clean and safe water is essential for thriving communities, and we heard that aging infrastructure as well as some industrial runoff can impact the quality of water at the tap and may require additional testing before it reaches the tap. We have seen some promising strategies to make sure that our water is clean. These include emerging contaminant treatment technologies, such as those to address PFAS in our water, in addition to community-led initiatives such as community testing at the household level. Some of the data related to clean and safe water is limited in certain cases, such as for small water systems or for domestic wells. In the cases of domestic wells and private wells, the quality of water can often be unknown. We also don't know the frequency or location of hauled or bottled water, which some communities rely on in cases when their water supply is contaminated. But we heard that there's interest in supporting small water systems with accessing data, and that there are some great data sets out there to do so. These include the Safer Program Dashboard, as well as the NRDC EPA Lead Pipe Interactive Map, which just recently came out. And I'll pass it over to Stephanie to talk about our remaining indicators.
Great, thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, another key component of this effort was looking at the water affordability throughout the region. So we've seen lately a lot of water districts are having to increase rates to maintain existing water systems, as well as Charlotte mentioned, develop new projects and new infrastructure to help increase reliability and resiliency of their water systems. And so we're seeing that there's an inherent trade-off here, right? You want to keep water rates low, but we also want to diversify and build new infrastructure to increase the reliability of those systems. We also heard that with the rising water rates, that certain communities through the CBOs that we interviewed are struggling with affording water or paying for water. And some questions that we've heard throughout several years, is when certain communities are saying, hey, we're conserving a lot of water, but our water rates are still going up. And so we actually heard some really promising strategies from some water districts that have found water rate structures to balance conservation and promote that while still keeping water affordable. Next slide, Charlotte. And we saw some really interesting data sets that have been newer in the world of water data, which you can see on the right here. So Duke University came out with this water affordability dashboard, which compares the median household income to the cost of municipal water. So you can start to see areas where that ratio may be a little higher, where communities may be paying more than what they're making to pay for water. The SAFER dashboard, what Charlotte mentioned, also has some great data on water affordability. What we did notice as a gap is, on the smaller water systems, we don't have as much data there. In addition to the costs for operating and maintaining individual groundwater wells that some communities may rely on, as well as agricultural water rates and the benefits of conservation for agricultural water producers. There was some lack of data in terms of agricultural water rates. Next slide. So another key theme that we looked at is the accessibility of water, the ability for our infrastructure to get water from point A to point B, as what Charlotte mentioned. So we have heard that managing infrastructure is expensive, existing and new infrastructure, and that more funding is needed to cover the costs of existing and new infrastructure and upgrades. We've heard a lot of really interesting strategies on jurisdictions working together to have cross-sector infrastructure planning. And we do see a lot of increased infrastructure funding. We have heard that small water systems, especially though, need support in pursuing that type of funding. Next slide. And so on the data end, in terms of water infrastructure, we did see a good amount of gaps and challenges when it comes to looking at the location and condition of water conveyance infrastructure throughout the SCAG region. So mostly this data would be encompassed within a local water master plan, and some jurisdictions have really robust water modeling and documentation of the condition of their infrastructure, and when pump stations or water lines need to be upgraded to have real robust ability to deliver water. But not all water agencies have water master plans, or they're not made public. Another gap we identified is that we don't have any information on historical water main breaks or gaps of service, which would be interesting to see, when failing infrastructure really may impact certain communities. Some promising strategies, though, beyond just developing local water master plans, is the modeling that's going on to create digital twins of water infrastructure to help improve the management of those robust water systems. Next slide. And our last indicator, really interesting, a lot of great work being put towards making sure our water systems are resilient. And so we're seeing a ton of agencies throughout California pursuing adaptive and resilient solutions and climate action planning to combat natural hazards and climate-related impacts such as drought, sea level rise, wildfires, extreme flooding. And so what we're seeing, though, is that we really got to come together and increase the cross-agency partnerships that are needed to support each other when these hazards occur. And we have at Geosyntec, we've worked recently on some examples, so we'd be happy to share more of those at the Q&A of doing increased cross-agency partnership planning. Next slide. And to conclude on resilience, so in terms of data sets, there's some great climate data sets out there, from local hazard mitigation plans, interactive maps on sea level rise, wildfire risks, flood mapping, CalAdapt, and some great information out there. The one thing that we haven't seen is a comprehensive data set that compares the overlay of water infrastructure with some of these climate hazards, which we would think would be a really interesting effort to pursue in the future to identify how resilient our water systems are. And we also heard that jurisdictions do need support with applying more up-to-date climate models within their local planning, which could lead to additional beneficial collaboration there. So now I will pass it back to Charlotte to close us out.
Thanks, Stephanie. So we know that was a lot of information, and so we wanted to wrap up with a couple of our key overarching conclusions. I think you heard time and again on our slides that we heard from our interviews and saw in our research that there's an opportunity for more coordination between planning agencies and water managers. There's really that opportunity to align across the decision-making that those agencies are making. And we already see those opportunities for coordination happening. We heard that many water agencies already use SCAG's growth projections in their urban water management planning. And so that could be an area to continue to build off of. We also mentioned several times and found that more funding is needed for many of these improvements, especially in relation to infrastructure upgrades to improve the region's resilience to climate change. So thinking about funding programs that support new infrastructure or infrastructure maintenance. SCAG has a funding program called the Regional Utilities Supporting Housing Pilot Program, also called RUSH, that supports some infrastructure upgrades. So more funding like that could be helpful. And then in terms of data, we heard that there are not many water management related data sets available or consistent across the region. And on the reverse side, that some member agencies and water districts could use support with adapting state or regional data sets to their local jurisdictions. So thinking about SCAG's regional data platform, which already brings some of those regional data sets together, is an example of one of those kind of regional lenses on existing data, or the support that SCAG provides to jurisdictions with new tools, such as through Toolbox Tuesday. So some ways to sort of bring those data sets to the regional level as well. So wrapping up with some next steps, SCAG is going to use findings from this work to identify strategies to support its member jurisdictions with addressing some of the issues we raised and with it addressing sustainable infrastructure needs in the region. Kim Clark, who introduced this session today, is on the line. Her contact information is here if you have any questions in the meantime, and please also feel free to drop additional questions into the chat as well. So with that, I'll say thank you all for your time, and I'll pass it over to Cecilia Estelano to get us started with our panel.
Thanks, Charlotte. Thanks for the presentation. I'm delighted to be facilitating a panel discussion that really gets to the heart of the need to do collaboration. We have three terrific folks, one from a county, one from the largest water wholesaler in the United States, and one from a water district. The good news is we already see new levels of collaboration, coordination going on amongst water agencies and water managers, and also between water agencies and water managers and urban planners. So we want to highlight some of those existing collaborations, but also draw out some lessons and some recommendations so that folks sitting in cities and counties can better think about how to plan, taking into account the challenges we're facing as a region related to water resources in the long term. So first off, I want to introduce Lee Alexanderson, who's the principal engineer at LA County Public Works. He's going to be talking a bit about the LA County Water Plan, and this is super cool. It's a collaborative effort between multiple public agencies and community stakeholders focused on improving watershed management across our vast Los Angeles County. So for each of these panelists, we're going to be dropping a link in the chat so you can get their resume or their LinkedIn, so you can look more about their background, because we want to get them right into their presentation. And then they're each going to present for about 7 to 10 minutes, and then we'll do Q&A. Go ahead, Lee, take it away.
All right. Good afternoon. Thanks, Cecilia, for the intro. Happy to be here and just listen to some of Charlotte's opening remarks about small water systems. It's very timely. I'm actually up in Antelope Valley today. We had a small water system listening session and got to meet a bunch of new water systems that don't really interact with on a daily basis. So I'll share more about how that ties in, but so much good overlap, so much good work. All right. So for the LA County Water Plan, first, I think it's helpful to set some context about where does our water come from. And so, at least in LA County, and it will change depending on if you're Ventura, Orange County, Riverside, but within LA County, most of our water comes from imported sources. So that's the Sierra Nevada to the north, Eastern Sierra, and as well as the Colorado River. So that means we're reliant on other regions, other climate conditions to ensure that we have a sustainable and reliable source of water. But then the balance of that water supply comes from our local water sources. And we have really good groundwater basins in LA County compared to other counties such as San Diego. They don't have much, so their portfolio looks vastly different. And the good thing with groundwater basins too, they don't evaporate like surface water reservoirs. So as much as possible, we want to maximize this resource. And then of course, recycled water is all the rage, and there's pure water projects, whether it's Pure Water SoCal, Pure Water LA, and it's all about branding, making sure that we're on the same point, same consistent messaging. And then in LA County, which is huge, stormwater capture. We get about 200,000 acre feet of stormwater each year, which is enough for about 1.6 million residents. So an enormous amount for doing well in an average year. And so this is one of the impetuses for the LA County Water Plan, the governance. So when people think about water, and generally when I'm in meetings and interacting with other partners, it's usually LADWP, Metropolitan Water District, but it's very rarely the small water systems that I got the opportunity to engage with this morning. And so in LA, we have over 200 different drinking water purveyors, which is an enormous amount. And the water infrastructure we have in LA, it's like a family quilt is what I've been thinking about. There's different family members, some you get along with really well, others you don't, but each family member contributes to the quilt in like their own unique way. So we have flood protection, we have wastewater, we have drinking water, we have stormwater quality. But then some parts of this family quilt, it's been worn out or the pieces just weren't ever stitched together. And so that's what the LA County Water Plan was looking to achieve. We were trying to figure out where are these gaps and what gaps collectively can we achieve best as a region. And so that leads us into how did the county water plan come to be? We knew there were issues, we knew there were challenges, and they had been lingering, but there were a few catalyzing moments. First was when we were coming out of that really deep drought from 2012 to 2016. State was in a crisis, wells were going dry in the Central Valley. Everyone was trying to figure out what's the best way forward. Some monumental legislation like SGMA, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, was established by the state. And so everyone, decision makers, policymakers, were making, really trying to move us forward with water resiliency. And so the LA County Board of Supervisors recognized that, hey, this was an important element and we should start looking into this. And then the LA County Chief Sustainability Office created our county sustainability plan. And so now the county had a North Star with where to proceed with sustainability. And one of the key actions was establishing a LA County water plan. And as the plan was developed, we started off with a vision. It was lofty, and I think it was a phrase, it was a mindset that a lot of our partners were all striving towards anyway, but collectively we could all agree on this vision. We could all support this. And so the county water plan, it articulates a shared, inclusive regional path forward to sustainably and equitably achieve safe, clean, and reliable water resources for Los Angeles County. And I love the last part. It's for Los Angeles County. It's for all residents, all communities. If you live, work, and play in the county, there's something that's planned for you. And where the plan really got traction was through our partnerships. We partner with DWP, LA County Sanitation District. We'll hear from Metropolitan, is always a crucial and critical member of anything water in the county. Las Virgenes, and many, many more water agencies that came to the table, sat down, and provided their ideas and input to develop this. And while Public Works helped to rally everyone to come to the table, it's not necessarily a county plan. It's a plan for all water resources within the county. And the development process, just to show the iteration, and I know the focus is collaboration. And so I just wanted to point out a few items. We jumped on existing networks such as the integrated regional water management meetings. We use those in the greater LA area, the Santa Clara area, as well as the AV. We had different work group workshops where we had subject matter experts from the different water agencies that were our key partners, and we interviewed them, hearing what they needed. And then we also went out to the community, to different environmental groups, environmental justice, community-based organizations, to hear what they envision the future for their water. So we went through this iterative process of crafting, refining, revising, craft, refine, revise, based on all these input cycles. And eventually we got to 2023 when the LA County Water Plan was adopted by the Board of Supervisors. And the plan, it's simple. I always tell everyone it's like a beautiful little magazine. You can pick it up. It's light in your hand. It's 60 pages at most, but it lays out the vision. It has targets, the strategies and actions, and the implementation. So it cuts to the chase quickly, and it's easy for most people to engage with and understand. The county water plan, it has 3 key areas. We have targets that are measurable, we have strategies, and we have actions. And how I like to explain this, just to get everyone on the same page, every plan has its own different jargon, whether it's objectives, metrics, yada, yada, yada. But targets, I like to use a sports analogy. Think of soccer. Soccer goals, they're easy to measure. One goes in, bang, 1 point. So targets, county water plan, all the different targets we have are measurable. Strategies, so those are kind of the approach you're taking to the soccer game. Are you playing up? Are you playing man? Are you playing forward, playing back? So it's the higher level strategies that are going to help you achieve those targets. And then finally, the actions. This is where the rubber meets the road. And these are the athletes moving, making the plays, being in the right spots at the right time. And so that's how the targets, strategies, and actions for the county water plan can be summed up. And the 4 holes in the quilt that the family identified, they're regional water supply reliability, groundwater management and quality, small at-risk system resilience and drinking water equity, and watershed sediment management. And we know regional water supply reliability is huge. And so we want to make sure that we're doubling down and ensuring that we're safeguarding the supply. And then groundwater management, again, we have large groundwater basins. They don't evaporate like surface water reservoirs, but there's also untapped potential with some of them where there's contamination. We could potentially improve and clean it up. And the small at-risk systems, there's so many small systems, at least over 100 through the county. There's a handful up in the Antelope Valley where I am today. And then there's a surprising amount within the LA basin, just tiny pockets within the larger purveyors, and they all need support. And then watershed sediment management. We've seen the devastation of the LA fires. And so we want to make sure we're being resilient and managing our watershed and water supply well. In the San Gabriel Basin in LA County, 12 of the 14 major flood control district dams drain into the San Gabriel groundwater basin. And so sediment problems at the dams are water supply problems downstream. And so that's one of the crucial issues. And for the partnership of the LA County Water Plan, last year, after it was adopted by the Board of Supervisors, there was a Water Resiliency Summit hosted by the Board of Supervisor Chair Lindsay Horvath at the time. And we had various water officials, GMs, executives come around and start adopting the LA County Water Plan. And so to date, we've had 10 different water agencies across the county adopt the water plan, essentially saying the ideas in it are good. We want to commit to further partnerships, and we need to do more with water resiliency across the region. And where the rubber hits the road with the county water plan right now are 4 task forces. So after that summit last April, there were 4 task forces of water communications that's looking to improve communication across the region. Because depending on your water agency, some might have a diverse supply of water and you might not be in a drought, but then you cross a different jurisdiction or different boundary and suddenly you find yourself in a drought. So what's up with that? The weather's still the same, but why is the communication not being coherent? And so we're looking to improve that. Another big task force is nature-based solutions. As we start realizing the true benefits of green infrastructure, but then even green infrastructure is slightly different than nature-based solutions. How do we define those across the county? What's an appropriate way to define nature-based solutions from a water perspective? And then what do we do next? And so we're honing in on standards for that. Next task force is regional water reliability, and that's trying to strengthen and promote some of the existing programs. So I know with Dave Pearson, the GM of Las Virgenes Municipal Water District, he heads up this one, and recycled water is a big emphasis on this, making sure that all the water agencies are on the same page. And then lastly, the last task force is small water systems. We were up here today listening to about 15 different small system operators, and I'll share some of the few things we heard today. It's funny. Most of them are retired, and then now they took on another full-time job as a small water system operator. They thought they could find some retirement, but now they're operating these small systems, trying to jump through these regulatory hurdles and manage just these very old systems. And so some had 23 connections, others had 500 connections, and a lot of them need help. They're volunteers. They're not necessarily staffed all the time. And so how can the county help fill in the gap between the State Water Board Safers program, along with some other organizations like Cal Mutuals? And so the water plan, it's a living document. It was adopted in 2023. It's a 5-year plan. We're looking out to 2045 for the ultimate targets. And so again, the collaboration, the county and Public Works and the flood control district, it has some actions that falls within its wheelhouse of stormwater capture. But then because of the collaborative nature of the plan, there's a lot of regional partners, LEDWP, Metropolitan Water District, smaller districts as well, and water agencies. And so all those actions help sum up to a more resilient future. We know no one agency can tackle it all, but our money goes further, our voices are louder when we're working together. And that's how we can help achieve those county water plan targets. And so where we are right now is one of the big items with the County Water Plan Task Force is they're pursuing a few key steps. One of the major targets in the county water plan is increasing local water supply by approximately 600,000 acre feet by 2045. And yes, that is a huge number. It's an aspirational goal, and we're looking to hopefully achieve that. I know different sources of supply. There's more stormwater that can be captured. There's high profile pure water projects coming online with recycled water. And then we're also implementing county water plan 2-year action plans. There's going to be a 2025 Water Resiliency Summit on Monday, June 16th. We have Supervisor Horvath on a panel with the US EPA Region 9 Josh Cook, Metropolitan's Chair Adon Ortega, and along with the State Water Board Chair Joaquin Escobar, we're going to have a pretty engaging panel. And then finally, other agencies are still adopting the county water plan as we move forward. And so all those actions are just leading up to a resilient water future. And again, it can't be done in a silo. It's all these partnerships, it's conversations, and it's going out to the communities as well. So
Right. Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Lee, for that thorough summary of the LA County Water Plan. We're going to pull back and go into our massive region that's covered by the Metropolitan Water District. I'm delighted to welcome Liz Crossan, who's the Chief Sustainability, Resilience, and Innovation Officer for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, largest water wholesaler in the country, and it's been doing some really interesting work around sustainability and resiliency. Go right ahead. Liz, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much, Cecilia. It's great to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the climate work that we've been pursuing at Metropolitan. I think this slide, there they are. So I just want to start off by saying I've been at Metropolitan for about 3 years. And this office, this Sustainability, Resilience, and Innovation Office, and this position, the Chief Officer, was a brand new opportunity at Metropolitan to really bring together the different groups within MET, whether that's our water resources planning team and engineering and infrastructure and operations and finance, to bring them together to do some integrated planning around climate resilience. So I'm going to share a little bit of those efforts with you all. And first of all, just to kind of start off with some of the catalysts for this work. We, for a long time at MET and other water agencies that we work with, if you're familiar with Metropolitan, you may know that we are the nation's largest water wholesaler, and we're made up of 26 member agencies. And those member agencies are some of them are wholesalers themselves, like in the Municipal Water District of Orange County. Some of them are cities like LADWP or Pasadena or Santa Monica or Santa Ana. And some of them are water districts or water agencies that are direct retailers. So we work and have for a long time with our member agencies on a collaborative long-term water resources planning. And so for a long time, we have incorporated drought, what it looks like to flip-flop back and forth between wet periods and dry periods, starting to understand that droughts are longer and more extreme. But what we're really facing today is the fact that all of these other climate impacts are additional impacts to our infrastructure, to our resources, like the long-term aridification in the Colorado River Basin, like the flooding that can result from atmospheric rivers in the region, extreme heat conditions, sea level rise, fire. So all of these conditions are things that we have felt at Metropolitan in a very real way, whether that's through sort of isolated events or cascading impacts like we've seen just this January in LA County with the fires, where you had a long drought, followed by wet periods and heavy vegetation growth, followed by winds, and those types of cascading impacts can really have a devastating impact on neighborhoods and infrastructure. And so it really led us to think about how do we better plan to really integrate all of these hazards and impacts into our long-term planning process. So we have approached climate really from, the two different sides of the coin. We have our climate mitigation efforts, so our efforts to reduce our own impact in contributing to climate change. We have a climate action plan that was approved by our board in 2022, and that lays out our strategies and targets for reducing our own emissions related to our facilities, reducing natural gas, transitioning our fleets, moving to more renewable energy. It also includes some measures that have both a climate adaptation and a climate mitigation benefit. So things like water conservation, which helps us adapt to these changing conditions into the future, the immediate impacts, at the same time that it helps reduce our energy use by reducing our water use. And so we really are approaching climate through this climate action plan to mitigate, as well as our climate adaptation work to address those immediate impacts that I just talked about in the last slide. Just a little bit about our climate action plan before I move on to climate adaptation. As I mentioned, it was approved in 2022. We have a carbon neutrality goal by the year 2045. This aligns with the state of California's goals. And this really means that we will reduce our carbon emissions as much as possible, but also look for opportunities to reach neutrality through things like carbon sequestration, as well as potential offsets. But we have made a lot of progress in greening the electricity that we use, both of our retail accounts and at our facilities where we've built solar and battery. So really looking to increase that quite a bit over the next several years. So I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation talking about our climate adaptation work. And this is what we've really been focused on over the last 2 years. Just last month in April, our board unanimously approved the Climate Adaptation Master Plan for Water. We call this CAMP for Water. And this plan is similar to what Lee said. We're really thinking about things in terms of 5 years because we don't believe that it's really in our best interest to set a plan for the next 20 years because we are dealing with so much uncertainty, so many different dynamics when it comes to climate and economy and population and growth, that it's really important for us to be thinking long term, but to be making decisions on the short term basis and tracking information and data. And so our board asked us to integrate our water resources planning, our infrastructure development into a climate adaptation and finance plan for us to really think about the investments that we need to make to be the most resilient we can in the future. And so we've developed this iterative and adaptive process that's really, it's circular. It's about, really assessing the risks that we face, setting some targets similar to the LA County Water Plan, identifying strategies to help us meet those targets, evaluating projects and investments, and then implementing. And one of the most important elements is this monitor and reporting. So really tracking the data. How are things performing? What does climate change look like? Is it behaving the way we thought? Is it a worst case scenario? Is it a more moderate case scenario? Tracking that real world data is really important to then kind of starting that process over, assessing current risks and figuring out how to address those risks. So at Metropolitan, when we think about resilience, we think about it in terms of a few different ways. And it's not just about that, what you think of just, withstanding an event. Although that's important, you want to be able to prepare for disruptions and withstand those disruptions, but you also want to be nimble enough and flexible enough and even redundant in some ways that you can recover from different shocks and stressors and then adapt and grow from that experience. So really thinking about it in terms of sort of this multi-level way of thinking about resilience of, being prepared, being able to recover, and really being able to thrive after the fact. And so that's really sort of the North Star of what we're striving towards. So I want to talk about Camp for Water. It does have the words master plan in the title, but it really isn't your typical master plan. When I think of especially a water master plan or a general plan, if you're a planner, you may think about a set of binders, and we've really moved away from that kind of static plan into a more living document, similar to what Lee was describing with the LA County plan. So really thinking about in 5-year increments, how do we ensure that the work we're doing can be iterative so that we can continue to refine, we can adapt and be innovative as we move through time. And so it has some particular elements that I think are really important to emphasize. One is that even though the plan itself, this implementation strategy that was just approved by our board, is a 5-year plan, we have committed to providing an annual report. So on an annual basis, we will provide data. We'll look at what the climate is doing. We'll look at what population is doing, what demands and supply look like, how our infrastructure is behaving and responding to climate impacts. And that's going to be really important for us to track on a daily basis or on an annual basis, not a daily too, but on an annual basis. And that allows us to be adaptive. And so, one of the things that we've done in this plan is instead of just having a linear sort of, this is where we think we're headed, these are this is the water supply gap we need to fill, and we're going to do it in this way. We're actually considering a range of potential futures. So we're thinking about that kind of worst case scenario. Let's say climate change is extremely severe on our sources of water. Let's say demands really increase. And by the way, we rely on entities like SCAG to help inform this data, help inform this decision making. So all the way from that sort of worst case scenario to a lot less change. So we can actually look at, there's a range of potential futures, a range of potential supply needs, and we can plan around that and then make decisions as we track data. And we do that in a way that integrates not just the water resources, but also looking at climate, looking at our financial situation, and doing that collaboratively with Metropolitan, with our board, with our member agencies, and with their agencies in the public and organizations that we work with as well. So as I mentioned, our board, Metropolitan Board, which is made up of our 26 member agencies, voted last month to approve what we have called the Camp for Water implementation strategy. This 5-year plan includes some, you can see it here in the lighter blue box, some time-bound targets. It has some overarching policies, and it has some timelines of the activities over the next 5 years. It also includes a tool that we call the Climate Decision-Making Framework. This is a set of evaluative criteria that will help us make decisions on big projects and investments. So we will use that evaluative criteria to evaluate our Pure Water Southern California project, which the draft EIR just came out last week. So we'll evaluate that using our 6 evaluative criteria. We will also evaluate Delta Conveyance. We'll evaluate the Sites Reservoir project. We'll evaluate refinements and improvements to our water conservation program, to other potential storage solutions and other programs. So a really important set of 6 criteria. And then our adaptive management process of really, checking that data, checking those signposts, and annually reporting on that information. And I just want to mention that in the gray box there, what this is really saying is that our board recognized that we at Metropolitan need to refine the way that we conduct business. We have long relied on rate revenue in order to continue to operate and maintain our system. And those revenues decrease as we become more climate resilient, as we become more adaptive and reduce our use. And so really thinking strategically about how to find other ways to generate revenue, to share revenue, to share the responsibility of different systems, and perhaps look at ways that we can increase the affordability for our member agencies. This is all part of this long-term adaptation process. So I did want to just touch a little bit on the 6 evaluative criteria. I think this is one of the most influential pieces of our Camp for Water process. So in the past, when we think about investments, we understandably really think about how much water are we producing, what's the acre feet, and what's the cost. Those are very important metrics when you're evaluating a water project. But we also wanted to make sure that when we evaluate these investments, that we're thinking about the infrastructure itself and its long-term resilience in climate conditions, its financial sustainability and impact on affordability. Adaptability and flexibility is a really important piece of all of this. One of the reasons that we really started looking at climate adaptation was because during the drought cycles of 2021, 2022, we had very low allocation from the State Water Project. We had a portion of our service area up in the LA, Las Virgenes, Cayugas area that was heavily reliant on the State Water Project from the Delta. And with restrictions there, they were actually under mandatory emergency conservation measures that the rest of our Southern California region was not. And that's really unacceptable. We need to be able to be flexible and adaptable enough to respond when there are shortages in one place, to be able to we had water in storage, we just couldn't get it to where we needed to. And so this was a real call to action for our agency. And also thinking about the equity implications, how are we impacting communities that we serve, and ensuring that we are providing community benefits, in particular to underserved communities, as well as environmental co-benefits. We want to think about the GHG impact. We want to think about ecological functions and ecosystem benefits as we invest in projects. So it gives us a much more comprehensive way at looking at the investments. And then I also wanted to mention this policy framework that's helping to drive our actions. We have some, very clear policy direction that our board has now approved in these 5 areas of reliability, resilience, financial sustainability, affordability, and equity. And so this really gives staff at Metropolitan the guidance to be able to take action and create programs and initiatives that will help us meet those. And I'm just going to move through this quickly because we are.
Yeah, we should wrap in about a minute, Liz.
Yeah.
A lot of content.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share, again, we'll be producing an annual report. Our first annual report is already out. If you want to look at kind of where we are in this process, that could be helpful. It reports on different data here that will inform our decision making, whether that's demographics or climate change. And with that, I think I'll wrap up and let the next speaker go so we have some time.
Really appreciate this, Liz. Yep. I'm going to move right into our next speaker, who is Ryan Shaw. Ryan he's the Director of Water Resources in the Western Municipal Water District. We're talking now about the Inland Empire, so out in Riverside County. And Ryan's got a little bit of different perspective. It's a region that continues to grow dramatically and is facing different challenges than the city of Los Angeles or the county of Los Angeles. So Ryan, take it away.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and apologies for being a few minutes late. It'll be tough to follow Lee and Liz, but I'll do my best here. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about Western Water, as we call ourselves. As was mentioned, we're out in the Inland Empire, the western side of Riverside County. We are a wholesale and retail agency, so we have to kind of wear a couple hats as we think about providing water services to all of our customers. In total, we serve about 1 million people, wholesale and retail collectively. Starting up at the top on the map that may be a little hard to see, Jurupa Valley, City of Norco, Corona, Riverside, all the way down to Lake Elsinore, Murrieta, and Temecula. So pretty big, about 526 square mile service area. 14 wholesale customers that we deliver water to, and a large majority of that we actually buy from Metropolitan Water District, from Liz's organization. So that's a big part of what we do here at Western. On the retail side, we have 2 retail divisions, one in Riverside and one in Murrieta. In total, about 25,000 retail connections, and that results in about a little over 100,000 people that we serve directly through our retail water systems. About 25 billion gallons of water is delivered each year through Western wholesale and retail. And you can see the percentage split there, imported versus local. Again, we call imported, most of that comes from Metropolitan Water District, and local is typically groundwater, as I'll get into a little more detail. Next slide, please. So for Western, what is water resiliency? The bullets that you see here, it's a portfolio approach. We can't just have one water supply. We can't have one solution. So I'll just list them real quick and then give some more detail on them. So statewide storage is a really big deal for us. Imported water, as mentioned, groundwater, recycled water, stormwater capture, water use efficiency, which is equivalent to conservation, and as we heard earlier, collaboration/partnerships. From our perspective, we have to have all of these things in order to be successful. On the right-hand side, you'll see a map of California highlighting where we get our imported water from. Again, through Metropolitan Water District, comes through what we call the Colorado River Aqueduct, as well as the State Water Project. So the Sierra Nevadas and Colorado Mountains, right? So hundreds of miles of movement of this water, but it's vital for all of Southern California, as well as quite a number of other ag entities and water districts. Local groundwater is also a huge part of Western's portfolio. We are the what's called a water master, which is a court-appointed entity that is responsible for managing groundwater basins. So we're out in the Santa Ana watershed for the most part, and there's about a dozen groundwater basins that we help oversee as the water master. So in terms of administrative activities and management of local groundwater sources, we're heavily involved. Not to mention that Western directly, as well as a number of our member agencies actually pump, produce, and deliver a large amount of groundwater. Recycle water is another huge one. I think it was touched on a little bit already, but up and down the Santa Ana River, historically, entities, cities have been just discharging recycled water to the river, and it would end up in Orange County. Nowadays, with the help of some new legislation, water quality treatment opportunities, most folks are actually building their own recycled water systems to keep the water local, offset potable water use for irrigation purposes, some industrial and commercial purposes, mostly for irrigation. Stormwater capture, this is another big one. Our service area butts up against the San Gabriel Mountains. So there's a whole lot of rainfall that comes down those creeks and rivers. And we have constructed over the years collectively a number of parties and entities, what we call recharge basins, but big old pits to capture this stormwater so that it doesn't get lost to the ocean. And we know that, with drought and wet years, it goes up and down, but the goal is to capture as much as we can. Water use efficiency hopefully goes without saying. This is fundamental. I mean, when you're looking at new development, it's a requirement nowadays. Everything has to be low efficient, toilets, washers, things like that. And of course, there's all kinds of rebate programs that we offer, Metropolitan offers, state, federal funding for things like that. And again, none of these programs, projects, water supplies don't happen without partnerships and collaboration. Next slide. Did we go the wrong way? Thank you. No worries. Perfect. And there may be some animation on this one, so I apologize. As mentioned, Western service area, the Inland Empire, is still booming, really growing. When you look at the growth projections, just within Western service area alone, not to mention the whole eastern side of Riverside County, at least 25% growth going forward. What you see here in front of you is 2016 to 2020 actual water demands by source. We don't need to go through those. Maybe click one more. There should be another bar that pops up. There we go. So this is the projection going forward. And again, SCAG helps out with these kind of projections. Obviously, the land use entities that we kind of feed off of help put these together. But as mentioned, over the next 25 years, we're looking at a 25% growth just within our service area. And so that doesn't include the rest of the county, as well as San Bernardino County. Next slide. All right, last one here. So there's been quite a few task force mentions here. We have our own out here in the Inland Empire called the Riverside County Water Task Force. This is a collaborative group that was put together and is currently run by Western Municipal Water District, Eastern Municipal Water District, and WRCOG, Western Riverside County of Government groups. Typically, we have all kinds of speakers. We meet on a monthly basis. Every Friday morning, we host it here at our office in the city of Riverside. Typically, we want to focus on, as you can see on the bullets here, legislation, anything that's going on coming down from the state or federal government. That could be water quality, that could be conservation, it could be housing requirements, development requirements, anything of that nature. Typically, we always are talking about development and growth, as mentioned. Out here in the Inland Empire, we see new communities popping up. We see warehousing popping up all over the place. And based on what we're getting from the land use entities, it's just going to continue further. Obviously, with water and any type of product that we purchase, there's always rate increases. And that's always a challenge. For us in the water world, we think we know what we're doing, and we always have to raise rates because costs go up. But that can be a really hard message to get across to the customers. So we often will have panels and presenters talking about rate increases and the explanation behind it. And then, of course, we always have updates on water supply conditions, local conditions, I mentioned imported water, state water project, as Liz mentioned, Colorado River conditions, things like that. And then again, this is one of the great partnerships that we have. We have over 100 attendees every month to make it out to this meeting. Recently, I guess since COVID, we try and do a hybrid, in person and virtual. So if anybody's interested, feel free to reach out and we'll get you the information. But it's a really good forum, really good speakers. Takes a lot of time and effort to set these kinds of things up, but I would encourage you to attend. And I believe that's my last slide.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Appreciate your presentation. I just want to say we're going to move into a panel discussion with questions and answers. We have a really nice big group of folks who've stayed with us on this call. I encourage you to drop any questions you might have in the chat. We'll have folks curating them, but go ahead and drop them into the chat. To get us started off, I have a few starter questions, but we really want to make sure that you all have an opportunity to interact with these three experts around water issues and how we can all work together better to have a more resilient future. So I'm going to start off the panel with talking with Lee first. Lee, you did a great job describing what LA has been doing LA County has been doing in terms of comprehensive planning and coordination. One of the features you mentioned in that plan is stormwater management. And you mentioned there's about 200,000 acre feet that get captured now, but LA County also passed Measure W, which, as far as I can remember, is the only dedicated source really for stormwater management. And it was done with the voters have approved it. It's been about 7 years now, I think, since that's been in place. And question for you is, how's that been going? What are some lessons you've learned? And maybe what are you most proud of having accomplished in administering that funding and getting it out to member agencies?
Yeah, so Measure W, it's everyone comes talking to us about it because like, how do you get that money for all that stormwater? And so it's been taken off since we've been implementing it since about 2019. And the biggest lessons are just all the community engagement and making sure that we have the different watershed areas identifying projects that they need to meet their goals. And it's been a lot to implement, right? It's $300 million coming in per year. And so first couple of years was standing up the program, and now it's just growing more and more and more every year. And so what we have right now is currently, based on the last Board of Supervisors approval, we have a suite of 137 approved and recommended new infrastructure program projects. And so that suite of 137, it's projects that are programmed. And one of the good things and also a challenging thing with the program is it funds projects from concept to through O&M. And so not every project comes to the program tied up neatly, ready for construction. And so as we start seeing more of these projects move from concept into design into construction, that's where we're looking forward to seeing how all the benefits start accruing. And so ahead of the construction of all these projects, we've been rolling out new metrics and monitoring for the different projects. We also have a more in-depth watershed planning going on for each of the sub-watersheds within the Safe Clean Water program. And this is all getting us prepared to really start tracking the true benefits. How much stormwater are we capturing from each of these individual projects? How much green space is being implemented? How much pollutant loading is being removed? How much more shade are we getting with trees being planted? So there's a lot of items that were thought of early on, but we didn't have a way to quantify them. And so now as the program starts to be more adaptively managed, we're looking to really do that triple bottom line analysis, start quantifying all the things that have previously been unquantifiable.
Yeah, I mean, the program is notable for its efforts to really have multiple benefits, projects that can do things like tree canopy and open space and habitat restoration in addition to reducing pollutant loads. So y'all can figure out the metrics and start tracking them, it would be very impressive and hopefully help to build support for measures like this in other places. Liz, let me turn to you. I was really struck about your Camp 4 water plan, that it's about climate mitigation and adaptation. And that notion of having a dynamic plan, it's not 20 years out, it's really only for 5 years because you know things are going to change. And I want to put out sort of a thing we know about. SCAG does projections, the state does projections on population. You have a service area of about 19 million people. It is really an astonishingly large area with lots of diversity, everything from, dense LA County to, bursting at the seams, Riverside County in terms of growth. But we do know that those growth projections can change, right? Typically, we don't even actually meet the growth projections that we predict. We also know that we've done a tremendous job on conservation. Everybody has done a really good job driving down really the per household demand. But one thing we've seen, and I really want to get your opinion on, is even though the amount of water we all use is going down per capita, we do have a few essentially new uses that are really driving demand, particularly in places like the Inland Empire. One off the top of the head is data centers. They're both energy intensive and water intensive uses, kind of hitting right at that heart of climate mitigation and adaptation. So I guess my question for you as somebody who's looking at this huge region is, how can water managers and city planners, which is really what we have on the screen today, plan for these kinds of things? How can they work together to deal with something like the rise of data centers that's going to hit all of us and affect our ability to maintain the water resources we need?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think, a lot of the planning that we've done and that we continue to do is around trying to project household water use. So we look at the gallons per capita per day, and that's still a really important metric. But as you state, there are these additional and new uses, in particular industries, that we really need to figure out a way, to better project and incorporate that into our growth models. And so, that's part of the reason why for us at Metropolitan, it was so important to really track this information on an annual basis. And we really have to do that in collaboration with our partner agencies. So we work with LADWP to look at, a heavily municipal, residential, lots of multifamily units to try to think about the use there. It's a very dense population, but not necessarily a lot of growth. Because we are seeing such great conservation and efficiency. But you look at the Inland Empire, where we're seeing a lot of, whether that's, different warehouses or data centers, or even just other industries, we need to be able to project and incorporate that into our planning. And so, it's a lot. That's, I think, a lot about why we're not just thinking about we need more acre feet of water, but do we just need to be more flexible? Because if the need is over here, but we have plenty over here, we just need to be able to move water around. And one of the ways that we're thinking about doing that is by using Metropolitan's infrastructure to facilitate exchanges among our agencies. So if San Diego has more water than they need during a certain season, is there a way for Metropolitan to help, get that that extra water to the Inland Empire or to Las Virgenes? And so that's a place where we're really thinking about adaptability and being nimble as a system, as opposed to just thinking about gallons per person and acre feet supply.
It's really interesting. It's an engineering challenge when you think about right? Moving water around and how much energy that takes if you're trying to go uphill. Ryan, I want to turn to you now. It was great to hear about the fact that you're running a task force that gets 100 people to show up, or virtually or otherwise, to talk about water in Riverside. It's really, really impressive. You are facing a lot of challenges in terms of growth. When we were doing the prep call, you had mentioned some exciting developments around water recycling, which is critical to all of our planning, is how do we do more water recycling? I wondered if you might talk a little bit about that. And I think you mentioned a project that's really getting underway, under construction soon, that's going to do exactly what you described more generally in your presentation, around making sure some of the water that would otherwise flow down the Santa Ana River to the ocean is actually getting reused for essential needs. Maybe talk a little bit about that project so folks can get a sense of what does that really look like.
Sure. the project I was mentioning, there's a wastewater treatment plant right above Prado Dam. If you guys are familiar with that, it's right along the 91 freeway right there. We are one of 5 member agencies that co-own and operate this wastewater treatment plant. And as I mentioned, historically, all of that recycled water would just go down the river, down to Orange County and potentially out to the ocean. So right now, we are wrapping up design and about to kick off construction to build a pretty large pump station on site to pump water uphill, as you kind of mentioned, an engineering and operating feat here. Probably maybe a dozen miles up north towards the city of Ontario. So a really big pump station, a really big pipeline that's going to move a large quantity of recycled water that is currently going down the river. And it'll be used for golf courses, parks, schools, mostly irrigation. There may be a commercial or industrial entity that might use some of it, but primarily for irrigation. But the project of this size, as most of you can appreciate, it takes years and years. So we've been working on this one for about a dozen years. And so for those of us that have been involved the whole time, it's really exciting when you're about to break ground. So that's a pretty exciting project for, and for what it's worth, the 5 entities are Western, City of Norco, City of Corona, Harupa Valley, and a small sanitation district called Home Gardens.
That's great. I mean, that is precisely the kind of interagency collaboration it takes to do a really major project like this. You talk about 12 years in the planning. You know, so you've got a bunch of planners on this call. First, before I ask my question, I want to also encourage people, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. Seth Wilson dropped 4 questions right in. Thank you, Seth. We're going to try to get to them. But if anybody else has any questions, please do drop it in the chat so we can get to it. So a question I wanted to ask each of you is, if you were, you know, and you're talking to a virtual room full of planners, what would you like them to do maybe differently or think about more deeply as they're moving forward, given the challenges we're facing on predictions, on climate, climate change, and really the unpredictability of so many things? What should they be thinking about in terms of planning, land uses, and water resources? What should they be doing maybe a little bit differently to help address this issue? Because they're the ones ultimately that are helping create the space and the entitlements that enable the growth. So I don't know if anybody wants to go first, or we could just go down the line.
I'm happy to go first if Liz and Lee are okay with that.
Please.
Sure. So the theme of today is collaboration. So I have worked at a city. I'm at a water district currently. I would say often and more frequent communication between the land use entities, and in my case, a special district, a water district. In particular, when you're working on new development. I know water and wastewater is just one of the things that planners need to check a box for. But we have to do our side of the work too, right? So the sooner we know about a development, a new community, 100 homes, 1,000 homes, warehouses, whatever it may be, the sooner we know about it, the easier it is for us to get back to you through your CEQA environmental process and check that box. So just more frequent communication.
Early and often. Yeah, that's great, Ryan. Liz or Lee, either of you want to address the issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think one direction I thought of when you were asking the question, Cecilia, was around, really spending the time to comprehensively look at our vulnerabilities. And it's hard to really, admit to some serious vulnerabilities that we have as a region, and to think about them in terms of the idea of the potential for cascading impacts.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm sure Leah is really familiar with the LA County Chief Sustainability Office did an LA County vulnerability assessment that really looked at not just particular climate hazards across the county, but how those hazards could be interconnected, this sort of cascading, like, if you've got electricity down, you've got transit down, you can't get workers to repair this. And like that kind of interconnection, when you're thinking about land use and transportation, temperature and shade and all of those things, it's just so critically important to be thinking about the interrelation of the hazards. when we're thinking about how we want our communities to look in the future.
It's a really good point, because if your water treatment plant relies on electricity, or you're requiring pumping to be able to suppress, to have water for your fire suppression, what happens when the electricity goes out in the event of a fire? It's a really good point, Liz, and they do cascade. Lee, what would you say to planners about how they might operate a little bit differently?
Yeah, even talking side to side, I think is helpful. I spent a few years in building and safety in Santa Clarita, and there's all these different jurisdictions, and normally you don't talk side to side. You talk to who's the regional planning authority above you, and not necessarily with the city as much. And in the water realm, it's vastly different. We work on watershed basis. And so there's so many different people all roped in within the one watershed that you can't help but talk with your neighbor to understand what they're going to do, and what, especially if their upstream impacts are going to have downstream impacts. So as much as possible, just I think cross-pollinating and understanding what's going on, just even adjacent to you. It's not always necessarily known. And I think that can be a really powerful way to have that moment of, aha, oh, you're facing this too. Okay, what's the best way to tackle this together to have a more coherent approach? So
Great advice, especially coming from a county where there are 200 different water agencies. Astonishing number. Omar has a question. Can water districts increase permitting costs for new, larger, privately owned swimming pools and use such funds to help with splash pads in high heat stress areas? Now, there's a planner trying to figure out a stream of revenue. Any thoughts on that, folks?
Well, I'll take a crack at it. I'll get it wrong, but that's probably a question for the attorneys. But
you play one on TV, so go ahead. Yeah.
Speaking from a water district perspective, we can always try and offer incentives and rebates and things like that. But I don't know that we could change permitting requirements. I think that would be beyond, at least in my case at Western, that'd be beyond our scope.
Yeah, Leah, Liz, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like a city, a planning or a city permitting issue, whether that's, city planning department. But I love the creativity of, thinking about how you can charge for some things in order to pay for kind of mitigating that thing that you're trying to address, yeah, so that's not something that Metropolitan would pursue, but I think those types of creative ideas are really important for redirecting.
Yep.
And I think if there's a will, there's a way for some of those, right? Because there's the different building codes in the state law, but also different, like when we try to implement low impact development, that's an added cost on our communities, and especially if they're disadvantaged communities, then it's harder to implement some of those solutions. So it can't say it can't be done, but I think it's very helpful when there's the political will behind that idea to make it gain traction.
Interesting. I'm thinking about that in the context of the cost of our water recycling type projects that you described, Ryan. It's very costly. And I think you had mentioned in our pre-call that you have federal and state fundings, and then quite a bit of funding coming locally. To the extent you have high intensity water users like warehouses and data centers, is a possibility of cities, working in conjunction with water agencies to create a surcharge that can help pay for some of those costs, since it feels like the federal government may not be as reliable as a partner as it has been in the past. I don't know if you have any thoughts on, it's sort of similar. How can we find other ways to fund rather than just through ratepayers? Any thoughts there?
Well, I mean, one thing at Metropolitan we're looking at is, really how to take advantage of other assets that we have. And so, whether that's power infrastructure, we own a lot of land, which we do for, for water purposes or for right-of-way purposes, but are there other ways that we can generate revenue? So we can, offset how much, we have to rely on ratepayers. I think that's, a lot of water agencies will do that, whether it's like telecoms leases. We have a lot of ag leases. So and I think that power is a real interesting, renewable power is another interesting
Yeah,
opportunity.
Omar had asked if there are any major floating solar PV projects planned on canals or reservoirs. I often hear people ask that question of Met. Is that something y'all are contemplating?
Yeah, we've been looking at it more on a reservoir basis. It's difficult on our Colorado River aqueduct because of the maintenance that's required on that system. But also, we do have a lot of land and rooftop that we're trying to optimize first, because floating solar can get pretty expensive. But I think it's a good tool to keep in as an option.
Great. Seth Wilson had put in about 4 different points to consider. He talked about how can water be incorporated into the California Jobs First initiative? And I think Seth had to leave, but it's an interesting question. Does anybody have an answer to that?
I don't have an answer for that, but I could share that within LA County, especially the Safe Clean Water Program,
Right.
there's a growing need for workforce development. We know that we need more well-trained staff that can work these more advanced green infrastructure projects. They're not necessarily flood protection channels, and they're not necessarily the spreading grounds where you can just go in, scrape them, like open pits and just increase infiltration. You need more well-versed electromechanics to operate some of these features if they have real-time weather controllers and diversions from the flood control channels that, we're trying to find ways to create that next generation of workforce that can operate this advanced water infrastructure, because that's part of the resiliency. Like if you don't have the people that operate and maintain the infrastructure, it's not going to hold up in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, please go ahead, Ryan.
I'm sorry, I was just going to add on to what Lee was saying. I completely agree. The water industry, in most industries, we keep talking about the white or silver tsunami wave of retirements that are coming. So
Right.
how do we be prepared in terms of providing water service on a go-forward basis? So what I was going to add is Western, along with a number of our partnering agencies, we actually go out to elementary schools and high schools and have basically workshops, programs to try and introduce them to, hey, there are opportunities out here in the water industry, because most of the time people just turn on their tap and they don't really think about it. So knowing that this wave of retirement is here and coming, we're doing everything we can, as Lee said, just to make sure people even know what's out there, what's available.
They're great jobs. They pay well and they have good benefits, and I read, but there's a low visibility about it, right? Because you all do your job so well, frankly. So nobody really even thinks about it. So let me take us out with a lightning round question for each of you. You've talked a lot about planning for 5 years out, but now I'm going to ask you to imagine, what is this region going to look like at 2100? How do you imagine? What's your vision for that? Given what we know today and where we're headed. Anybody want to go first?
I mean, I would say when I think about the future, it's going to be green and thriving. Like I look back, the LA County Flood Control District, right? It was formed 1915. We're 100 years in. And so, and the infrastructure that was created was based on the voices of the communities back then. We need protection from flooding. That was the best solution we offered. But now, as we look forward, the communities are voicing, we need more green space. We need more reliable water. And so I think there's going to be a lot more nature-based solutions being prevalent, and then a lot more coordination between the different water systems as well, especially the small ones that are kind of in their own pockets elsewhere.
Great. Thanks, Lee. Ryan or Liz?
Yeah, sure. I'll add a little bit. Given climate change, from a water perspective, we have really wet years, really dry years. It's very flashy. We always read these articles about atmospheric rivers and driest years on record. So, it's this ping pong, right, back and forth. So in my neck of the woods in the Inland Empire, if we expect to grow even 25%, even 20% in the next 25 years, we need to be prepared for both scenarios. And a big part of, I was going to say our concern, but what we're focused on is additional statewide storage in order to capture all that water in those really wet years so that it's available in dry years and be able to move it through folks like Metropolitan Water District and their infrastructure. So I think we need to prepare for both. I agree with what both Lee and Liz said. Okay, 5 years, let's plan, let's act, but you got to look long term too.
Appreciate that, Ryan. Liz?
Well, I think what happens in 2100 really depends on the people here and the people that we bring up in the industry and train to work on water and climate issues. There's a really wide range of potential futures that could happen in 2100 based on what we do right now. And so I think, really focusing on that climate mitigation piece and ensuring that we're all looking at ways to reduce our own contribution. Because the worst case scenario in 2100 is it could be pretty severe. And again, I think that what we do right now and how we make our decisions and the way that we operate is really, so it's kind of a non-answer. It's kind of like, it depends on what you all do and we do together. So leave it at that.
That's a good way to take us out. We have some optimism from Lee about a green and thriving future. I would say optimism from Ryan, because I hear you saying that you think there might actually be a state conveyance by 2100, which who knows, right? It's taken 50, 60 years to even get this far. And Liz, it all depends on us, right? So with that, I want to thank everybody for staying with us. I want to thank our panelists who provided some really important background information. A lot of great resources out there. Encourage people to stay in touch with SCAG as we figure out the next steps to help support agencies in planning for their water future. I want to pass it up to Kim to take us out.
Thank you, Cecilia, and thank you to our speakers. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us here today and dive further into water issues and opportunities in the region. Highly encourage everyone to tell us how we did. Take a quick 2-minute survey to help us improve future Toolbox Tuesdays. And with that, I hope everyone has a good rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Stay safe.
Thank you.